Well, it was one really great riding season. I know I put plenty of miles on my bike, both of them, and putting hundreds or even thousands of miles on a bike can really put some wear and tear on it. Sometimes we are so busy riding, we forget that our bikes are like our cars and they do need servicing. Now, ongoing general maintenance will help you keep your motorcycle in great condition with the possibility of not having any unpleasant surprises on the road. That's the last thing you want. I'm Donna Kessler, and today I am at Orange County Choppers, and we are going to talk about why it's important to get your bike serviced, and with winter coming, how you should probably store your bike so you are ready for next year's riding season on this episode of My Ride Garage. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of My Ride Garage. I am here with Paul Tuttle Sr. and Christian Welter of Orange County Choppers. And we're going to go over servicing because they do service here, like bikes from top to bottom. Any type of bike, any model bike, any make bike, they service it here, which is really good to know. And the guys are very knowledgeable here. They not only build bikes, but they can service them as well. When you take them apart, you know all the ins and outs, so you couldn't ask for a better place to bring your bike. First thing we're going to go over, guys, and we're going to kind of do a little bit of everything here. Belts, okay? There's belts on bikes and there's chains on bikes. How does one know when their belt is too loose, too tight, chain is too loose, too tight, maybe not enough oil on the chain? You know, how do you tell?
Well, I think that mainly there needs to be a little bit of play in actually the belt and the chain. The belt doesn't need to be lubricated, but it does need to be checked every so often. And the difference with a chain basically needs to have a half-inch of play also, except for when it's new. Usually when you start out, it's pretty tight. You leave it a little tighter because it stretches, and then you ride it for a while, and then you check it again. We use a special grease on the chain to keep it lube, and occasionally you gotta check it again to make sure that there's enough lube on there.
Okay. And tires, those are like really important, folks. And even if you look at your tire and say to yourself, I can get a few more miles out of that, there's a possibility that that tread is not good. Yeah. And before you get on the road and let it get all squirrely, how do you know when is a good time to check your tire before you start seeing metal showing through?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things with tires, first and foremost, is tire pressure, and that's something we recommend before you ride. And sometimes it's kind of a pain in the butt to do it every time, but really, if you're doing 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, it's one of those things where it's really important. And overinflated can be just as bad as underinflated.
Now, tire pressure varies with different bikes?
Varies with different bikes,
tires.
Yep, and generally tire manufacturers post on the tire what they want. Sometimes, it can vary if you're riding, someone on the back as well. You have more weight. You put a couple more pounds in, and depending, especially on slick roads and stuff, you don't want a very overinflated tire. It gets very slick. But anytime we recommend you get onto a bike, visually just look at the tires. Is there any metal sticking out? Is there is it not flat?
The depth of the thread. I mean, you can tell whether there's there's other ways of doing it, but most people look at the tire and you pretty much know.
And you guys actually have a gauge.
Yes,
we do. We have a gauge here. Aside from our eyeballs, we actually use a gauge, and we do New York State inspections here. So, we use this, quite often, and they want to see at least a 1/16 of an inch. Of tread left before tire replacement, or they possibly won't pass their state inspection.
So the gauge is much better than the penny test.
Yeah, well, you know what, the old penny test, we're old school here. The penny test works just as well. But again, tires, they are one of the most important things that need to be serviced. Also, another thing on that topic, not on this particular bike, but spoke wheels also. It's one of the most overlooked service items, I think, and especially with there's a lot of Harley Davidsons and all the metric a lot of metric cruisers and everything. The spoke wheels, if they get loose, That can affect your handling.
The spokes themselves?
The spokes
They
themselves.
loosen, it
Yeah.
changes the balance.
Yeah, change the balance of the wheels. You'll notice handling around corners. You start to get sloppy, and they actually give. And and there's a sequence that needs to be done, and for them to be tightened. And a lot of times people ride their bikes for 80,000 miles and never check them once. And I don't understand why it's not riding as nice as it used to. And
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I got spokes on my bobber. I should probably...
You ought to bring it in.
Check your
tires,
I
too.
never knew that. Never knew that. All right, tires are equally important, and attached to the tires, of course, are the brakes. And- yep.
Calipers and the rotor.
Yeah, and now these are exposed, unlike a car where you got to look in through the wheel. So if rotors are bad, they would feel rough, or like
Actually smoother.
they would be smoother.
Yeah, because the brake caliper, right? The pads will.
it could be both ways. You could have, like he's kind of mentioning, being glazed over.
Yes.
And that could be just as bad as when you have a rotor that's really bad. It could be warped, not true anymore. And it could also be grooved. Same thing like what happens on your car after 50,000 miles, whatever. You'll get grooves in it, and you want it to have a little texture to it, but not not real deep grooves in it, because that'll cause a problem. And actually, it'll wear your pads out a lot quicker that way also. So rotors and then your pads. We always do a visual check. You kind of look down, and a lot of bikes you can see. Sometimes you can't, and you have to pull the caliper off and take a look. And also, your manufacturer will have a specification for thickness, what's acceptable, how thin it can go to before it's time
Does
to
it matter
replace
like how many miles you ride your bike before you?
It's hard
are
to say.
different.
It's hard to
Yeah.
say because
Brakes differently,
some people ride from here to Florida and don't hit their brakes twice, and they're just highway riding. And then there's some people who put 1,000 miles on their bikes and they're just yanking on them all the time. They're going light to light and hot
Right, so
rodding.
like mountain riding, like we do
Yeah.
around here, would
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
be, you want to
Yeah.
bring it in like midway season and
Yeah.
just have those checks.
Some people use their back brakes most of the time.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It varies. One of the important things too is that the rotor's centered in your caliper. You always want that rotor centered in between the pads. Otherwise, one side will wear or rub.
Right.
And brake fluid is another thing also. It's not, something that you service, even on a yearly basis, but it's also another thing that's kind of overlooked because over time, your master cylinder brake fluid naturally wants to collect water.
Right.
And it eventually starts to break down the fluid, and it just doesn't work like it used to, and it starts to feel spongy.
How often should one change? I know like in a car, it's like, 3,000 to 5,000 miles, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like each year they're saying more because of the technologies and advancements in oils themselves.
Yeah.
For motorcycles, though, it's I always recommend at a more frequent interval. Between 1,500 and 3,000 miles, and
Okay.
and I always recommend a good quality oil and not the stuff you find in Joe Schmo's gas station that you've never heard of the name before. It's worth the extra couple dollars. It really is.
Well, there is a certain oil that you have to put in motorcycles.
Sure.
Right? You don't take car oil.
Right. Well, they're one of the big things, with most motorcycles. Harley Davidsons have, most Harleys have 3 separate oils in them: one for the clutch, one for the transmission, one for the engine. Whereas some of the metric bikes are one oil, and everything is in one. And what they don't want you to use is car oil in that, because it doesn't have the same, technical term, friction modifiers and all that, and actually can make your clutch slip and can do weird things. So motorcycle oil has different friction modifiers and detergents in it specific to motorcycle wet clutches. So that's one of the key differences.
Gotcha. And the oil filter, right?
Yep.
That
And that's
should be changed when you get
every
the oil
time.
change.
Yeah, there's no sense in changing oil if you're not going to change your filter, because everything's going through that. And different manufacturers offer different micron. They measure it by microns of filtration.
Yep.
Again, a good quality filter is key, because they're pretty inexpensive, and it's one of those things.
Now, does that go along with gas filter too?
A fuel filter, a little not as frequent, but a fuel filter. A lot of bikes, some of the more modern fuel injected bikes, they do have a fuel filter, but it's you kind of have to take the fuel tank off.
It's in the fuel tank,
yeah,
right?
Yep.
Even some cars now, the
Sure.
fuel filter's in the tank.
Yeah.
But also, maybe another service item is suspension,
Yep.
and front fork oil. Almost all modern day bikes are hydraulic front fork setup, and
Yep.
they have an oil in it, and they have different viscosities, and for different forks and for different weights of riders and everything else, and conditions of riding, and again, it's everything's specific to particular bikes. There's 50 different kind of oils out there.
Well, if the fluid is low, it's hydraulic fluid that's in here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if the fluid does get low, will these get loose? Like, will they bounce more, like a bad shock, like, on your car?
More like a pogo stick, say, because the function of the fluid is to really slow down motion, because you have a spring in there, and if it was just a spring, it would flop all over the place. And the fluid, through a valving system, it just kind of slows down motion.
Now, unfortunately, winter is coming. Just snowed the other day upstate. What do you guys recommend as far as storing your bike? Now, if somebody's going to store them in their garage like I do you empty the gas tank? Do you leave the gas in there and put a stabilizer in?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you recommend for storage as far as gas?
Yeah, I like to have fresh gas in it. Run your put your stabilizer in it according to what it says, how many ounces per gallon or what have you, different brands. And I like to personally fill the tank up because of less chance of corrosion.
And you put the stabilizer in
Yes, ma'am.
before
Yep.
storing it?
Before storing it, you actually want to run the bike with the stabilizer in it.
Oh, okay.
Whether it be especially with a carbureted bike, because what happens is you want the stabilizer to get down into the carburetor, into the bowl.
Okay.
And that's where everything's going to want to sit, and that stabilizer will help, decrease your chances of that gumming up and turning into turpentine.
Now, the same rule applies for fuel injected?
Fuel injection, not as much. It's not a bad idea to get it, shot through the injectors, but it's not as critical. But having it in your tank, same thing. You want it to, kind of shake it up a little bit and then top it off. Because if you have quarter or half tank of gas, you're going to get, a lot of times, if you're in a cold garage especially, you're going to get corrosion above the fuel line. So you'll notice that, come springtime.
Yeah, it'll start clogging up the lines.
Yeah.
Carburetor.
Yeah.
Fuel injection.
And then you'll have a whole heap of problems.
Sure.
Also, when you're storing your bike, say in an unheated garage, you recommend bringing it up off the floor, maybe putting it on blocks or a jack, or
Yeah.
I heard parking it on cardboard is good.
Yeah, something, really the main reason for that is keeping weight off of the tires, because if it sits long enough, you get flat spots in the tires. So, you hear a lot of people, like to put jacks underneath it and get the weight completely off of it, which is a great idea, on something softer than concrete, like a carpet or, some sort of rubber mat or something is good. But I like to push the bike around if it's going to be on the floor, every week, in 2 weeks even, go and move it so it's sitting on a different part of the tire and kind of just, and that helps it. So you don't get flat spots. And with the storage, come springtime, you give us a little, advance notice. You want to come pick it up and ready. It's getting warm out. It'll be ready to go. And that, oil change, filter, make sure it runs good and everything. Yeah, you want to make sure it runs, because you don't want any surprises. You get on the bike and it doesn't start or it's running weird. So, and stuff happens when it sits. So we make sure that's all good and before it goes out the door.
Yeah. Now, folks, if you want parts for your bike while it's being stored for the winter, come here and look in the parts department. They have probably everything, like Paul said. If you don't have it here, they can get it for you. They also have a machine shop, and some really talented guys can build any part you want. You want something fancy on your bike, draw it up. They can work it out on the CNC machine and everything, the water jets.
Wheels, anything,
Yeah, new wheels, new handlebars. I mean, they can really fix up your bike the way you want it to, and there's no better time to do it than in the winter when you're not riding your bike. Guys, thank you so much, and certainly if somebody brings in their bike, they can hop on over to the cafe and grab a burger or whatever while their bike is being serviced, right?
Yeah.
Shoot bowl some lanes of bowling there, or play foosball.
Shopping in the store.
There you go. So there's lots to do here at Orange County Choppers while your bike is being serviced.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining me today. It was a pleasure. I learned a lot. We'll definitely have to check out my spokes.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go Going for a ride on your bike should be enjoyable. Breaking down because of low oil, bad tires, or a dead battery is something you don't want to happen, and it can be avoided just by getting your bike serviced regularly. If you have the knowledge to do it yourself, go for it. But you know what? I really recommend you take it out to one of the many great, knowledgeable mechanics and bike shops and dealerships that we have here in the area, just like the guys here at OCC. Don't blink. Daytona is right around the corner, so make that appointment soon. This is Donna Kessler from My Ride Garage.